Hello, Robs. We're back with Complete Guide to Oracle and Prophecy Methods by Joseph J. Weed. This is Chapter 2. I actually forgot about this book, but here we are. The Ancient Delphic Oracle and its Prophetic Truths. On the morning of the 7th day of the 5th month of the year 559 BC, a procession moved slowly along the sacred way to the temple of Apollo. The group of richly dressed men had started at dawn from the village of Delphi on the Corinthian Gulf in the territory of Phocis. Some 2 hours later, their arms and ornamented cloaks glistening in the early morning sun, they were passing the various votary shrines and approaching the sacred cavern beneath the overhanging cliffs of the Phaedriades, the test designed by Croesus. These petitioners, Halat and his retinue, were the emissaries of Croesus, king of Lydia. They were one of 6 different groups that had been dispatched from Sardis months previous, and each charged with a similar mission. The leader of each group was instructed to consult a different oracle on the same day, the 7th day of the 5th month, and to ask the same question. In addition to Halat, who was about to consult the Pythoness in the temple of Apollo at Delphi, I'm guessing that's Delphi, other messengers of the king would that day consult the oracles at Dodona, Bronchidae, Zeus Ammon, Trophonius, and Amphiorus. The question all were instructed to ask was, what is Croesus doing at home in Sardis at this very moment? This was a test. Shortly after coming into power the year before, Croesus had been visited by Solon, a sage for whom he had great respect. Solon had cautioned him against overextending his ambitions and suggested he consult with a reliable oracle before undertaking any major campaign of conquest. Since there were many oracles then offering advice, Croesus, a practical man, thought he might test their various abilities before selecting one to be his guide. Halat and his group came into a small glade, hardly more than a cleft in the side of Mount Parnassus, called then Phaedriades, the Shining Rocks. He was met there by 3 simply garbed men of middle age, the priests of Apollo, and instructed by them in the necessary procedures. First, he was asked to write out his question or request. If he was unable to write, one of the priests offered to do so at his dictation. But Halat was a well-educated noble and proceeded to write the question on the tablet provided. Second, he was instructed to remove his sandals and bathe his hands, face, and feet in the water of the stream, Castalia, where it formed a pool below the sacred cavern. After this lustration, he was further purified by a fumigation of laurel leaves and barley meal, and then conducted down into the cavern of the Pythoness. Footnote 1, the verb used is kata, bainin. The cave of the oracle. After passing through a low door, he found himself in a small room about 18 feet deep and 12 feet across. Before him was a large golden statue of the god Apollo, and next to it, an egg-shaped stone covered with inscriptions, most of them so old they could not be distinguished. This was the sacred Omphalos. To his right was a low stone sarcophagus, and its inscription told him it was the tomb of Dionysus. Directly before him, in the very center of the room, a young woman in classical flowing garments was seated upon a bowl-like device which rested on a tripod entwined by serpents. She was young and of pleasant appearance, but otherwise not remarkable. Her body was slender, but her hands were large and her skin rough. She looked like the daughter of a shepherd. The priest who entered with him cautioned silence, and the 2 men, Halat and his priest guide, stood motionless for several minutes. Meanwhile, the young woman, the Pythoness, the oracle of Apollo, took several deep breaths. Her eyes were closed, and it seemed to Halat that she was eagerly breathing in fumes with an exotic odor which rose from a small crack in the rock beneath the tripod. He tried to sniff these, but was successful in getting only an occasional whiff, for the gas, if such it was, dissipated rapidly as it rose directly from the little fissure in the floor, past the Pythoness, and out through an opening in the cavern directly above the girl. The one or two slight breaths he did inhale he found spicily pleasant, but otherwise odorless, and they seemed to have no effect on him. The priestess speaks. His attention was now drawn to and focused entirely upon the young woman before him. She started to tremble, at first in brief shivers, but soon she was shaking continuously in an uncontrolled manner. Her face, docile and pretty in repose, became contorted at one moment into masks of pain and anguish, and at the next into pleasure and delight. When, in her frenzy, it appeared she might fall to the rocky floor, she started to speak. Surprisingly, her voice was deep, masculine, and mellow as she spoke the following words. All is known to me. I can count the sands and I can measure the ocean. I have ears for the silent and know what the dumb man meaneth. Lo, on my sense there striketh the smell of shell-covered tortoise, boiling now on fire with the flesh of lamb in a cauldron. Brass is the vessel below, and brass to cover above it. Having said this, the Pythoness appeared to lose consciousness. The priest went to her assistance and motioned Halat to leave, which he did. In a few moments, the priest reappeared and said that the priestess was now resting comfortably and would sleep after her exhausting effort. He offered Halat another tablet and told him to write down the oracle which had been given. The Lydian emissary was puzzled. It had meant nothing to him. He did, in fact, regard it as the confused mutterings of a woman more concerned with cooking than with the instructions of the god. But aided by the priest, he wrote it as it was given and prepared to depart. Then, after making suitable offerings, the messengers of Croesus returned to Sardis. Croesus confirms the oracle. When the oracle was presented to Croesus, he was delighted. This is indeed the only accurate pronouncement, he said, for Croesus, desiring a convincing test, had performed none of his regular duties on that day. Instead, he turned cook, a practice he had not indulged in since his boyhood. He had taken a tortoise and a lamb, and cutting them into small pieces, had boiled them in a covered brass cauldron. No other oracle had been as accurate as the Delphic pronouncement, and as a consequence, Croesus followed Solon's advice and consulted the Pythoness of Apollo at Delphi. As I said, that's probably Delphi. Many times thereafter. Now we are not so much concerned with what the oracle said to Croesus, or to any other petitioner, as we are in learning how she came into possession of the knowledge she imparted. How was she able to see accurately events taking place at that moment hundreds of miles away? Or more remarkable still, how was she able to forecast events still in the future? What was the technique employed? Or the equipment, if any? What did her oracles have in common with the prophecies of biblical times, or with those of the present day? Can these abilities be developed by anyone, or are they divine prerogatives of a chosen few? Ancient man leaned heavily on oracles and prophets. From earliest times, the desire of man to learn what the future holds has led him to seek out this knowledge in many ways. 3,000 years ago, every monarch worthy of the name had his personal soothsayer. China, Greece, and Rome had their oracles. Ancient Egypt had its gifted priesthood, and if legend can be trusted, the sinking of Atlantis was forecast by visionaries gazing into the future. These were not just the childish superstitions of an ignorant and undeveloped people. The leaders themselves, the best educated and most intelligent men and women of the day, regarded quite seriously the words of the then current oracle or prophet. Croesus himself was a fabulously wealthy and powerful king. As rich as Croesus is a common expression even today. He was no fool, yet he frequently consulted the oracles at Delphi and Dodona, and usually followed their advice. It is not unreasonable, therefore, to assume that the predictions made must have had a high average of accuracy. They must have been good, or they would not have convinced so many people for so many hundreds, nay, thousands of years. Now let us examine the techniques employed by these sensitives, the soothsayers, augurs, oracles, and prophets throughout the ages. We want to determine exactly how they came to a knowledge of events, to come and how you yourself can today employ these procedures to obtain your own glimpses of the future. Since we have started with the description of a visit to the oracle at Delphi, we will proceed in the next chapter to a study of the technique employed there and at other oracles of that day. Oracle techniques. Do you see them? They're coming. They're coming. I predict these are coming. Goodbye, Robs. Goodbye.